Welcome to the True Man Podcast. This is an invitation of radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul in a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better son, a better dad, and a better spouse. Well, how's your heart doing today? Great question to ask after Valentine's Day, isn't it? You know, the heart really is central to becoming a true man. So I'm glad you're taking the time to visit the True Man community here today and maybe learn a thing or two. Hopefully, hopefully I'll show up with a little wisdom here today. But thank you for being here and spending some time with me on the True Man podcast. Real quick, please take time to visit my website, truemanlifecoaching.com, and head on over to my book page. You'll see that across the tabs on the front there. Head on over and grab that True Man, True Ways book. And it's really a culmination of things that I learned that have really helped me along my journey and path. And it really is a large part on things that I have learned from my mentors, the people, the wise people that I've been around, and spending time on this podcast, learning from each of you. Also, you will find the link to the True Man Inner Circle there, my True Man Inner Circle newsletter. Go ahead and sign up for that and stay up to date with all the latest happenings in the True Man community. So just wanted to touch on a few things there. And you can also, as always, this link is available to send all of your friends. Go ahead and grab your phone right now, click on the podcast, and forward it on to a buddy and have them join the show. Maybe it'll spark a conversation between you and him and be a great way for you to go deeper in life. And I love hearing those stories when they come back to me that something like a podcast, as simple as a podcast, sparked a great conversation, right? Circles back to the heart. It's all about getting our hearts right and being the very, very best men that we can be. Now, speaking of which, let's slide right on in here to the podcast. So last week, we talked about, I don't know. What do you do when you don't know? And today we're going to talk about the courageous decisions that we get to make in moving forward in life without guarantees. So that's kind of the culmination here of as we continue on this little conversation, if you will, about what to do when you don't know. Well, the first thing you need to do is, of course, seek first. Pray, listen, ask for wisdom, and trust God. Now, I know that's not easy, but these are great places for you to start. But eventually, as you're well aware, every man reaches the next moment. What is that moment, you may ask? Well, the moment after prayer, the moment after counsel, the moment after reflection, and the moment when a decision must be made. This is where a lot of people stall out. This is where a lot of people run. Not because they don't love God, not because they don't want wisdom, but because they want certainty. And everything we're talking about here doesn't provide that. And God rarely gives certainty. Now, what does he give? Direction. And then he asks you for courage. So let's talk more about that today. So there's a gap that every man must cross. That gap between wisdom and action, faith and obedience, direction and movement. Now, most men, they don't struggle with knowing what's right. They really struggle with doing it, right? We all know what's right, but the struggle is in the doing because action always involves risk, doesn't it? Things like this will pop into your head. What if I fail? What if I'm wrong? What if this doesn't work? What if I regret this? So what do? Well, we wait. Just wait. Not waiting on God, waiting on guarantees, right? But oftentimes those guarantees never come. Now, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8 says this: By faith, Abraham, when called to go, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Boy, does that sound familiar in my life right now. But, friends, that's faith. Not knowing the destination, but still moving anyway. Imagine Abraham saying, God, I'll go once you show me the full map. He never would have left. Faith is not clarity. Faith is obedience without full visibility of what's truly going to happen. Now, a true man learns to move when God says move, even when the outcome is unknown. I like to say you need to be in action, be in a ready position to move. Now, we think waiting oftentimes creates safety. All right, newsflash. It doesn't. It just doesn't. Sometimes waiting is just fear wearing some kind of spiritual language. I'm praying about it. I'm waiting on God. I'm seeking clarity. But deep down, we know, don't we? God has already shown us the next step. We're just afraid to take it. Joshua 3 tells one of the clearest leadership stories in Scripture. So the Israelites stand before the Jordan River, right? Flood stage, impassable, impossible. And so God gives them instructions. Have the priest carry the ark, step into the water. Not after the river parts, but before. And the moment their feet touched the water, the river parted. Movement preceded the miracle. That action step they took, being in the ready position, is what preceded the miracle. Not certainty, not guarantees, just obedience. So where are you standing on the edge of the river right now? Is it in your career? You wondering what's next? If you don't know, do you just hate your job? And you're wondering, is there something more out there? Your calling, your leadership, your marriage? Is your marriage falling apart and you're standing on the river going, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. Forgiveness, faith, risk. Gosh, we can't take a risk in the unknown, can we? Are you waiting for the water to part when all you have to do is step in? Because God may be wanting and he may be waiting for you to step, to take the action. Matthew 14 says storm, waves, and fear, right? And Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. Tell me to come. And Jesus said one word, come. Peter steps out, not because the storm stopped, not because the water changed, not because the risk disappeared, but because Jesus spoke. And for a moment, Peter walked on water despite the storm, despite the waves, despite the fear. But because Jesus spoke. And for a moment, there was Peter. The miracle happened in motion until he second guessed himself, of course, right? But let's redefine courage here for a minute, which is what Peter was experiencing for a moment in time. Courage is not confidence in outcomes, courage is obedience despite uncertainty. You don't need to be sure it will work. You need to be sure that God is leading. That's the difference here. You know, many men today live stuck in decision paralysis. Many people do, not just men, overthinking, overanalyzing, second guessing everything, delaying. Why? Because modern culture teaches us that mistakes are a catastrophe. You know, the Olympics is going on right now. We had a skater, United States skater, make a mistake. And I was reading, I did not see it. I was reading some of the headlines, and you would have thought this guy skated into the head of a car the way they were describing it. Why would he want to come back from such a calamity in front of everybody? But you know, scripture teaches us something different. God guides moving people, not frozen ones. We can overcome anything. In fact, our mistakes sometimes will make us better if we take time to understand them. Proverbs 16:9 says this, in the hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Notice the word steps, movement, action, progress. God establishes steps, not intentions. You know, a true man does not wait for perfect conditions. I've learned this. Have you experienced this? Gosh, there's just so few times in life when the perfect conditions exist. So you got to move with wisdom, move with prayer, move with counsel, and move with faith. Because obedience matters more than certainty. A true man knows this. But what if you're wrong? This is the fear underneath everything, right? What if I make the wrong decision? Now let's talk about that honestly. You know, God is bigger than your mistakes. He's bigger. He sees all. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good. All things work together for good, not perfect decisions, not flawless execution. All things. God's sovereignty is greater than your uncertainty. And that truth frees you to act. So the real risk is not making the wrong decision. The real risk is refusing to move when God calls. It's delayed obedience. Delayed obedience, is still disobedience. Now that's strong, but it is truth, isn't it? God rarely shows us the full plan. He shows us the next step. There it is again, the next step. Just like a lamp lighting a path, one step at a time. You don't need a 10-year plan. You need the next faithful step. And courage is really the biggest part of taking that. Wouldn't you agree? So let's slow down and ask some real questions here. What decisions have you been delaying? Where is fear disguised as wisdom? What step of obedience have you been avoiding? And if you trusted God fully, what would you do next? What is God already asking you to do? Now, none of these are easy questions, but they're honest ones. Questions you can take and go look in the mirror. Because here's something powerful. You'll gain clarity, and clarity often comes after action, not before. So when Abraham left, clarity came. When Peter stepped out, clarity came. When the priest entered the water, clarity came. You see, God reveals more once we obey what we already know. And leadership is not knowing everything. Man, I've read a lot of leadership books. I've never read anywhere where I need to know everything. Leadership, though, is moving responsibility when you don't. So your family, you've commonly heard me say this, your family doesn't need perfection, they need faith. Your children don't need guarantees, they need a courageous model. You. Your wife doesn't need certainty, she needs trust in God. You see, that's leadership, right? So as I close out today, if God has been speaking to you, if you know what the next step is, if you've been waiting for certainty, this is your moment to move, to be in action, not recklessly, not impulsively, not blindly, just faithfully. Believe me, I know I'm right in the middle of this with you right now. That's why we're talking about it, right? Because God meets men in motion, and a true man doesn't wait for guarantees. He walks with God into the unknown. Just like Moses taking people through the desert sometimes. Doesn't it feel like we're in the desert periodically? Well, I hope you enjoyed today's True Man podcast, really kind of working through a decision series here a little bit on making decisions and not knowing. And how do we move courageously when these things appear and show up in a season of life? This is all about being prepared. All about being prepared for the next if and when something happens in your life. We're always going into or out of or just coming through something. And the whole idea of becoming a true man in life is to help prepare you to move through it a little easier. Well, we want you to move through life more successfully, and really that's what being a true man is all about. Well, again, I hope you enjoyed this True Man podcast. If you did, please leave me a great review on your favorite podcast channel. And as always, if you'd like to talk, just send me an email at mike@truemanlifecoaching.com. And you can get on my calendar by going out to my website at truemanlifecoaching.com. All right. With that, well, I hope you truly enjoyed learning how to make decisions courageously. So go out and make those decisions this week. Do it prayerfully with discernment and wisdom through Christ. Now go out and make this your very best day ever. God bless you, and thank you so much for listening.